The medical facility on Kepler Prime was quiet except for the soft hum of air recyclers. The white walls were clean and bare, designed to calm patients from different worlds. In a small room near the back, two beings sat across from each other, at a simple metal table. Dr. Myleth adjusted her recording device and looked at her patient. Zexathara was a large creature even when sitting down. His dark green shell covered most of his body like armor. 4 arms moved restlessly as he spoke, and his black eyes never stayed still for long. Scars covered his shell in patterns that told stories of many battles. Some were old and faded, others looked fresh and angry. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview," Dr. Myleth said in a soft voice. She was one of the few doctors in the galaxy who studied minds damaged by war. "I know this is not easy for you." Zexathara made a clicking sound with his mouth parts. It was how his people showed they were nervous. "The war has been over for 2 years. Why do you want to know about it now?" "Because soldiers like you are still suffering," she replied. "We have treated veterans from 12 different species since the war ended. But your case is special. You fought humans directly. Most soldiers who did that are either dead or refuse to talk about it." The alien veteran shifted in his chair. It was built to hold his weight, but he still looked uncomfortable. "There is a reason we do not talk about it, Doctor. Some memories are too dark to share." Dr. Myleth leaned forward slightly. "That is exactly why we need to understand. The collective lost the war despite having better weapons and more ships. Your military leaders are still trying to figure out what went wrong. Your testimony could help prevent future conflicts." Zexathara was quiet for a long time. His 4 hands moved on the table, tracing patterns that meant nothing to the doctor but seemed important to him. Finally, he spoke. "You want to know about humans? About what makes them so dangerous?" His voice got lower. "I will tell you, but do not expect to sleep well after hearing it." The doctor nodded and started her recorder. "Begin whenever you are ready." Zexathara stared at the wall behind her for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice sounded different, older, more tired. "Before the war, we knew almost nothing about humans. They were just another young species that had recently learned to travel between stars. Our scouts reported that they were weak physically. Their technology was basic compared to ours. They had no natural armor, no claws, no poison. They looked harmless." He paused and made that clicking sound again. "Our intelligence officers studied their military history. They fought many wars on their home planet, but that was normal. Most species fight among themselves before they reach the stars. What surprised our analysts was how often humans fought each other. They seemed to enjoy conflict." Dr. Myleth made notes on her tablet. "Did this concern your commanders?" "No. It made them confident. A species that could not stop fighting itself would be easy to defeat. Our war planners expected the humans to surrender quickly when faced with superior force. They thought human governments would make deals to save their colonies." Zexathara's eyes grew darker as he continued. "The first mistake was thinking humans were like us. When the collective goes to war, it is a decision made by our ruling council. They weigh costs and benefits. They set objectives. They tell the military what to capture and what to avoid destroying. War is just another form of negotiation." He stopped talking and stared at his hands. Dr. Myleth waited patiently. "Humans do not think about war the way we do," he said finally. "When they fight, something changes in them. They become something else, something that does not care about costs or logic or survival." The doctor looked up from her notes. "Can you give me an example?" Zexathara nodded slowly. "My first encounter with human forces was on a colony world called New Dakota. It was supposed to be an easy victory. The planet had only 50,000 human settlers. We brought 2 full battle groups with enough firepower to destroy much larger forces." His voice became mechanical, like he was reading from a military report. New Dakota was a farming world. The humans grew food crops and raised animals. Our intelligence said they had no military bases and only a small security force. The colony administrator was a civilian named Jake Morrison, who had no combat experience. It looked like the perfect target for a quick victory. Dr. Myleth noticed that Zexathara's hands had stopped moving. They were perfectly still now, pressed flat against the table. We attacked at dawn, as planned. Our assault ships hit their communication center first. Then we destroyed their power plant and water treatment facility. Standard tactics to force a quick surrender. We gave them 1 hour to give up. Did they surrender? The doctor asked. Zexithara made a sound that might have been laughter, but there was no humor in it. They did not even respond to our surrender demand. No communication at all. At first we thought we had damaged their equipment too badly, so we landed ground forces to accept their surrender in person. He was quiet again. Dr. Myleth could see his chest moving faster as he breathed. I was part of the first landing party. 60 of our best shock troops in full combat armor. We had energy, shields, and plasma weapons. Each of us could have fought 100 humans with basic weapons and won easily. His voice got very quiet. We landed near their main settlement. It looked abandoned. No people in the streets, no vehicles moving, just empty buildings and silence. My unit commander, War Leader Krex, ordered us to search the buildings one by one. We were looking for the colony's leaders so we could arrange their surrender. Zexithara stopped talking and stared at the wall again. Dr. Myleth waited, but he seemed lost in the memory. What happened next? She asked gently. The first building we entered was a school. Human younglings learned there. It was full of small desks and colorful pictures on the walls. Very peaceful, very innocent, or so we thought. His hands started shaking slightly. War Leader Krex sent me and 2 others to check the upper floor while he searched the lower level with the rest of the unit. The stairs were narrow, built for smaller human bodies. We had to go single file. Dr. Myleth noticed that all 4 of his hands were shaking now. Halfway up the stairs, the human appeared. A female not much larger than a human youngling. She was holding what looked like a child's toy. She smiled at us and said something in their language. It sounded friendly. Zexithara's breathing became rapid and shallow. Then she pressed something on the toy and the building exploded. The room was silent except for the hum of the air recyclers. Dr. Myleth put down her tablet and looked at her patient with concern. The explosion killed my 2 companions instantly. Zexithara continued. I survived because my position on the stairs protected me from the worst of it, but I was trapped under rubble for 3 hours before the rescue team found me. He looked directly at Dr. Myleth for the first time since starting his story. Do you understand what this means, Doctor? A human female, probably someone's mother or teacher, had turned a school into a bomb. She waited inside for us to come, knowing she would die when it exploded. She smiled at us before she killed herself and my friends. Dr. Myleth was quiet for a moment. That must have been very traumatic for you. Traumatic? Zexithara's voice got louder. Doctor, that was just the beginning. What happened at the school was normal compared to what came later. That human female was not a soldier. She was not insane. She was just a regular person who had decided that killing enemies was worth dying for. He leaned back in his chair, looking exhausted. That was when I first understood that we were not fighting an army. We were fighting an entire species that had decided to go to war. Every human on that planet, from the youngest to the oldest, had become our enemy, and they were willing to do things that no sane species would consider. Dr. Myleth made more notes, trying to process what she was hearing. The battle for New Dakota lasted 6 days, Zexithara said. We won, technically. We controlled the planet when it was over. But we lost more soldiers in those 6 days than in the previous year of fighting other species. And we learned something that would haunt us for the rest of the war. What was that? Zexithara's black eyes met hers again. We learned that humans do not just fight wars. They become war itself. Dr. Myleth watched as Zexithara sat in silence for several minutes. The alien veteran's 4 hands moved restlessly on the table surface, tracing invisible patterns. His breathing had slowed, but she could see the tension in his armored body. Would you like to take a break? She asked softly. Zexithara shook his head. No. If I stop now, I may not be able to continue. The memories are like poison. Better to let them all out at once. He straightened in his chair and looked past her at the white wall. After the school explosion, everything changed. War Leader Krex called for reinforcements and ordered us to be more careful. We started using drones to search buildings before we entered them. We thought we had learned from our mistake. His voice became flat and emotionless, like he was reading from a report. The drones found explosives in many buildings, houses, shops, even a medical clinic. The humans had turned their entire settlement into a trap. But we were prepared for that now. We could destroy the buildings from a safe distance and force the humans to come out and fight in the open. Dr. Myleth made notes on her tablet. Did that strategy work? Zexithera made that clicking sound with his mouth parts again. For a few hours, yes. We destroyed 12 buildings that contained bombs. We thought we were winning. Then Jake Morrison appeared. He paused and his eyes focused on something Dr. Myleth could not see. Morrison was the colony administrator. Our intelligence files said he was a farmer who had taken the job because no one else wanted it. He had no military training, no combat experience, just a human who grew food crops and managed supply schedules. The alien veteran's hands stopped, moving. He walked out of a building at the edge of the settlement, alone. No weapons that we could see. He was wearing simple clothes and had his hands raised above his head. It looked like he wanted to surrender. Dr. Myleth looked up from her notes. That sounds reasonable. That is what we thought. War leader Krex ordered us to surround Morrison and take him prisoner. If we had the colony leader, we could force the other humans to surrender, standard tactics that work with every other species. Zexithara's breathing became faster again. 12 of us moved in to capture him. Morrison stood, perfectly still, and waited for us to approach. He was smiling, not the scared smile of someone who was giving up, a calm, confident smile like he knew something we did not. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air recyclers. Dr. Myleth waited for him to continue. When we were 20 meters away, Morrison shouted something in the human language. It was loud enough for everyone to hear. Then he pulled something from his pocket and threw it on the ground. Zexithera's hands began shaking again. It was not a weapon. It was a small device that made a bright flash of light. For a moment, we thought it was some kind of distraction. Then the real attack began. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. The humans had been hiding underground. They had dug tunnels under the streets and buildings. While we were destroying empty structures, they were moving beneath our feet like insects. Morrison's signal told them exactly where we were standing. Dr. Myleth felt a chill as she listened. The ground exploded under 6 of my unit members, not from bombs planted in advance. The humans were setting off explosives right beneath us as we moved. They had been tracking our every step. Zexithera stared at his hands. But that was not the worst part. As my comrades were dying in the explosions, Morrison calmly walked toward us. He was still smiling, still had his hands raised. He looked like he was surrendering, but he was actually leading us into a kill zone. The alien veteran's voice became bitter. More humans appeared from the tunnels. They came up behind us while we were trying to help our wounded comrades. Each human was carrying crude weapons, projectile guns that fired metal bullets. Primitive compared to our plasma rifles, but effective at close range. Dr. Myleth noticed that Zexithera was speaking faster now, like he wanted to get through the memory quickly. The humans did not fight like soldiers, they fought like hunters. They worked together without needing to communicate. Each one seemed to know exactly what the others would do. It was like watching a single creature with many bodies. He paused and took several deep breaths. In the confusion, I saw Morrison again. He was no longer pretending to surrender. He had picked up a weapon from one of our fallen soldiers and was using it against us. This farmer with no military training was handling our advanced plasma rifle like he had been born with it. Zexithera's eyes met Dr. Myleth's. That is when I realized that human intelligence reports were worthless. Morrison was not just a farmer. None of the humans were just civilians. They all had military knowledge. They all knew how to fight. They all knew how to kill. The doctor looked confused. But your intelligence said the colony had no trained soldiers. That is correct. New Dakota had no official military force, but every human adult had served in their species' military at some point in their lives. It is normal for them. They call it mandatory service. Every human learns to fight before they learn to do anything else. Zexathara's voice became grim. We discovered that a human farmer is also a trained sniper. A human teacher is also a demolitions expert. A human doctor is also a combat medic who knows how to treat wounds and how to cause them. Dr. Mylith made rapid notes trying to keep up with the implications. The battle in the settlement lasted 4 hours. We had superior weapons and armor, but the humans had advantages we had not expected. They knew the terrain perfectly. They had prepared for months, and most importantly, they were not afraid to die. His hands moved nervously on the table again. I watched a human female named Lisa Grant deliberately step into our line of fire. She walked calmly out of cover while we were shooting at her. She was hit multiple times by plasma bolts that should have killed her instantly. Zexathara's voice became very quiet, but she kept walking toward us. Even with mortal wounds, she kept moving. She had grenades attached to her body, old-fashioned, chemical explosives that our sensors had not detected. When she was close enough, she detonated them. Dr. Mylith stopped writing and looked at her patient with concern. The explosion killed Grant and 3 of my unit members, but that was not why it terrified me. What scared me was that Grant had been smiling as she walked toward us. She looked happy, like she was doing something wonderful instead of committing suicide. The alien veteran was quiet for a long moment. After Grant's sacrifice, more humans appeared. They seemed to come from everywhere at once. The tunnels, the damaged buildings, even from underground positions we had already cleared. It was like fighting ghosts that could appear anywhere. His breathing became rapid again. War leader Krex ordered a full retreat. We had lost half our unit and gained nothing except the knowledge that humans were far more dangerous than anyone had believed. As we withdrew, I could hear them in their tunnels. They were not celebrating their victory. They were planning their next attack. Zexathara looked directly at Dr. Mylith. That night back at our base camp, Krex received new orders from the Fleet Command. They were sending 5 more battle groups to New Dakota. The humans had convinced our leaders that this colony was strategically important, but I knew the truth. What truth? Dr. Mylith asked. The humans were not trying to defend New Dakota. They were trying to teach us a lesson. They wanted us to know what we were really fighting. They wanted us to understand that every human settlement would be like this one. Every battle would cost us more than we could afford to lose. His voice became bitter, and they succeeded. By the time we finally controlled New Dakota, we had lost more soldiers and equipment than in any previous battle of the war. The colony was destroyed. The humans were defeated. But somehow, we felt like we had lost. Zexathara slumped in his chair, looking exhausted. That was my first real encounter with human warfare, Doctor. It taught me that everything we thought we knew about combat was wrong. Humans do not fight to win battles. They fight to destroy. Their enemies will to continue fighting. Dr. Mylith reviewed her notes, trying to process what she had heard. The worst part was yet to come, Zexathara added quietly. New Dakota was just the beginning. The humans were just getting started. Dr. Mylith noticed that Zexathara was gripping the edge of the table with all 4 hands. His knuckles had turned a pale green color, and his breathing was shallow and quick. "We can stop here if you need to rest," she offered. Zexathara shook, his head firmly. "No, you need to hear about Titan Station. That was where I learned that New Dakota was not the worst thing humans could do to us." He released his grip on the table and leaned back in his chair. When he spoke again, his voice was different, hollow, like he was talking about someone else's memories. After New Dakota, the fleet commanders thought they understood the problem. Humans were tricky fighters who used their own people as weapons. The solution was to attack them in space, where they could not dig tunnels or hide bombs in buildings. Dr. Mylith made notes while listening. That sounds logical. The High Command chose Titan Station as our next target. It was a mining facility in the human home system. Hundreds of humans worked there, digging valuable metals from asteroids. Our intelligence said it was lightly defended with only basic security systems. Zexathara's eyes became distant again. The plan was simple. We would surround the station with warships and demand surrender. If they refused, We would board the station and capture it intact. The metals and equipment would be useful to our war effort. He paused and made that nervous clicking sound. I was selected for the boarding party because of my experience fighting humans on New Dakota. The commanders thought I understood their tactics. They were wrong. I understood nothing. Dr. Myleth looked up from her tablet. What made Titan Station different? Zexathera was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. The station commander was a human named Paul Harrison. He had been a military officer before becoming a mining supervisor. His chief engineer was Maria Santos, a female who had designed mining equipment for 20 years. His hands began moving restlessly again. When our fleet arrived at Titan Station, Harrison responded to our surrender demand immediately. He said, the humans would fight to the last person. He said they would make us pay for every meter of the station we took. The alien veteran's breathing became faster. We thought he was bluffing. The station had 300 humans against our force of 2,000 elite soldiers. We had the best weapons and armor in the galaxy. They had mining tools and basic security. Weapons. Dr. Myleth noticed that Zexathera's hands were shaking again. The boarding operation began at dawn. We cut through the station's hull in 12 different places. My unit was assigned to secure the command center while other teams captured the reactor and life support systems. He stopped talking and stared at the wall behind her. The first sign that something was wrong came when we entered the station. The corridors were completely dark. Not just the lights turned off, but absolute darkness. Our helmet lights could barely penetrate it. His voice became mechanical again. Then we realized the humans had filled the air with some kind of particles, tiny bits of metal dust that reflected and scattered light. Santos had used the mining equipment to create artificial fog that blinded our sensors and made our weapons less accurate. Dr. Myleth made rapid notes. That's very clever. Clever was not the word I would have used, Zexathera said bitterly. We were stumbling through corridors we could not see, breathing air that tasted like metal while humans who knew every inch of the station moved around us like ghosts. He leaned forward and put his head in his hands. The first trap was in the main corridor leading to the command center. The floor looked solid, but Santos had weakened the support beams beneath it. When my unit walked across, the floor collapsed and dropped us into a lower level. His voice became muffled. 3 of my comrades fell into a room that Santos had filled with toxic gas from the mining operations. They died slowly, clawing at their helmets while the chemicals ate through their breathing apparatus. Dr. Myleth felt sick, but continued, taking notes. The humans had turned their workplace into a weapon. Every piece of equipment was a potential trap. The elevators would suddenly stop between floors and fill with poisonous gas. The artificial gravity would shut off without warning, leaving us floating helplessly while humans in magnetic boots attacked us. Zexathera raised his head and looked at her. But the worst part was the sounds. Harrison was using the station's communication system to broadcast recordings throughout the facility. Sounds of our soldiers dying. Sounds of metal being cut. Sounds of humans laughing. His hands were shaking violently now. The laughter was the hardest part. These humans were facing certain death, but they were enjoying themselves. They had turned their last battle into some kind of game. Dr. Myleth reached across the table and offered him a cup of water. He took it gratefully and drank before continuing. My unit spent 6 hours trying to reach the command center. A journey that should have taken 20 minutes became a nightmare of traps and ambushes. We lost soldiers to electrified doors, poisoned air vents, and corridors that suddenly decompressed. He set down the cup and his voice became very quiet. When we finally reached the command center, we found Harrison waiting for us. He was sitting calmly at his desk reading a book. He looked up when we entered and smiled. Zexathera's breathing became rapid and shallow. Harrison said he had been expecting us. He said Santos had prepared a special welcome for our arrival. Then he pressed a button on his desk. The room was silent except for the hum of the air recyclers. The command center was equipped with industrial mining lasers for cutting through asteroid rock. Santos had reprogrammed them to track movement inside the room. When Harrison pressed that button, the lasers activated. Dr. Myleth stopped writing and stared at her patient. The lasers cut through our armor like it was paper. 5 of my unit members were killed instantly. The rest of us dove for cover behind control panels and equipment racks. His voice cracked. Harrison kept reading his book while the lasers fired over our heads. He acted like nothing unusual was happening. Like soldiers dying violently, and his office was completely normal. Zexthara was breathing very fast now. We were pinned down for 2 hours. Every time we tried to move, the lasers would track us and fire. Harrison just sat there reading and occasionally making notes in the margins. Dr. Myleth realized she was holding her breath. Finally, our reinforcements arrived and disabled the laser system from outside the room. When the weapons stopped firing, we rushed Harrison's position to capture him. The alien veteran's hands were pressed flat against the table, but Harrison was not there anymore. While we were hiding from the lasers, he had escaped through a maintenance tunnel that Santos had prepared. He left the book on his desk. It was a human story about soldiers who fought impossible battles and won through courage and sacrifice. Zexthara looked directly at Dr. Myleth. There was a note tucked inside the book. It said, "Welcome to Titan Station. Enjoy your stay." It was signed by Harrison and Santos. He was quiet for several minutes. The siege lasted 3 weeks. We controlled most of the station after the first day, but the humans made us fight for every room, every corridor, every storage closet. They used wounded soldiers as bait to draw us into traps. They rigged dead bodies with explosives that would detonate when we tried to move them. His voice became bitter. Santos had turned the entire station into a machine designed to kill us. Water pipes would burst and flood sections with boiling liquid. Air recyclers would pump out oxygen and replace it with toxic fumes. Even the toilets were weaponized. Dr. Myleth made notes but found it hard to concentrate. The humans fought like they were already dead. They took insane risks and made impossible sacrifices. I watched a human engineer named Danny Price hold a position for 4 hours while mortally wounded, just to give his comrades time to prepare another trap. Zexthara's voice dropped to a whisper. In the final assault, we cornered Santos in the POE engineering section. She had been wounded by shrapnel and was bleeding badly, but she was still trying to trigger the station's self-destruct system. He stared at his hands. Even dying, she was smiling. She looked at us and said something in human language that our translators could not interpret. Then she activated one last trap that killed 3 more of my unit members before we could stop her. The room was completely silent. When the siege ended, we had captured Titan Station. We had won a great victory according to the official reports. But we had lost 800 soldiers doing it. 800 of our best fighters, killed by 300 human miners and technicians. Zexthara looked up at Dr. Myleth. The humans had taught us another lesson. They showed us that any place they lived could become a fortress. Any group of humans could become an army. Any human could become a weapon. He slumped in his chair, and we still had not seen the worst of what they could do. Dr. Myleth watched as Zexthara sat motionless for several minutes. The alien veteran seemed to be gathering strength for what came next. His 4 hands were perfectly still on the table, but she could see the tension in his armored shoulders. The attack on Earth was supposed to end the war, he said finally. His voice was so quiet she had to lean forward to hear him. The High Command decided that humans would surrender if we threatened their homeworld. They thought we could force a quick peace treaty. He looked up at her with those dark, haunted eyes. They were wrong about everything. Dr. Myleth checked her recording device to make sure it was still working. How many ships did the collective send to Earth? The largest fleet in our history. 500 warships and 2 million soldiers. We brought enough firepower to destroy entire continents. The plan was simple. Land troops in remote areas, establish bases, then threaten human cities until their leaders agreed to negotiate. Zexthara's breathing became shallow again. I was part of the Advanced Reconnaissance Force. 3,000 elite scouts sent to prepare landing sites and gather intelligence. We were supposed to be the best soldiers in the galaxy, veterans who had fought on dozens of worlds. His hands began that restless movement again. The reconnaissance. Ships landed in what our computers said was empty wilderness, forests and grasslands with no major population centers nearby. perfect for establishing a base without immediate human interference. Dr. Mylith made notes while listening. What did you find when you landed? Zexthera was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was filled with something that might have been fear. At first, nothing. The forest looked exactly like our orbital scans had shown. Trees, streams, small clearings. No signs of human activity. No buildings, no roads, no technology. Just wilderness. He paused and made that clicking sound. But something felt wrong from the moment we left our transport ships. The forest was too quiet. On every other world there are sounds. Animals, insects, wind through leaves. Earth's forest was silent like a tomb. Dr. Mylith felt a chill as she listened. We set up our base camp in a large clearing and began scouting the surrounding area. Standard procedure. Map the terrain, identify resources, look for potential threats. Everything seemed normal for the first day. His voice became mechanical again. On the second day, we started finding human settlements, small towns and villages hidden in the forest. From orbit, they had been invisible. The humans had built their homes under the tree canopy where our sensors could not detect them. Zexthera's hand stopped moving. The settlements looked abandoned. Houses with doors standing open. Vehicles parked neatly in driveways. Meals still, on tables like the families had just stepped away for a moment. But there were no humans anywhere. He stared at the wall behind her. My unit commander, Strike Leader Vorth, thought the humans had evacuated when they detected our ships approaching. It seemed logical. Civilians would flee rather than fight, trained soldiers. His breathing became faster. We were wrong. The humans were there. They were watching us. They had been watching us since the moment we landed. Dr. Mylith looked up from her notes. How do you know? Because of what happened on the third day. I was part of a patrol checking a human settlement about 5 kilometers from our base. 20 soldiers in full combat armor. We were searching houses for intelligence about human defenses. Zexthera's voice dropped to a whisper. In one house we found a human female, elderly, maybe 60 years old by their standards. She was sitting in a chair in her living room, knitting something with colored yarn. She looked up when we entered and smiled at us. His hands began shaking. She spoke in their language, but our translators interpreted it as a greeting. Something like, "Hello, boys. Would you like some cookies?" She seemed completely unafraid. Like 20 armed alien soldiers in her home, was perfectly normal. Dr. Mylith felt her pulse quicken. Strike Leader Vorth ordered 2 soldiers to search the rest of the house while the rest of us questioned the female. She kept smiling and offering us food from her kitchen. She acted like we were guests instead of invaders. Zexthera's breathing became rapid and shallow. While she was talking, she reached into a basket beside her chair. Vorth thought she was getting something to show us, maybe identification papers or a communication device. Instead, she pulled out a small metal object and pressed a button on it. The room was completely silent. The house exploded. Not just the building we were in, but 6 other houses around it. The entire neighborhood had been rigged with explosives. That elderly female had waited in her home for days, knowing that enemy soldiers would eventually find her. His voice cracked. She had turned herself into bait. A sweet old grandmother offering cookies to strangers. But she was really a weapon, waiting to be activated. Dr. Mylith stopped writing and stared at her patient. The explosion killed 12 of my unit members instantly. The rest of us were buried under burning debris. I spent 4 hours trapped under a collapsed wall before rescue teams found me. Zexthera put his head in his hands. But that was not the worst part. While we were trapped in the ruins, we could hear other explosions in the distance. Every human settlement in the area was detonating. The entire population had turned their homes into bombs and waited for us to find them. His voice became muffled. Later, we learned that the evacuation was fake. The humans had not fled. They had hidden in underground shelters and bunkers while some of their people stayed behind to spring traps. The empty towns were all carefully prepared kill zones. Dr. Mylith realized she was holding her breath. The reconnaissance mission was a disaster. We lost half our forces in the first week, but the High Command refused to believe our reports. They said we were exaggerating. They said humans were just using guerrilla tactics like any desperate species would. Zexthera raised his head and looked at her. So they sent the main invasion force. 2 million soldiers in the largest military operation in collective history. They were going to show the humans what real warfare looked like. His hands were pressed flat against the table. The invasion lasted exactly 4 days. Not 4 weeks or 4 months. 4 days. Then our commanders ordered a complete withdrawal. From the Earth system, Dr. Mylith found her voice. What happened? The humans had turned their entire planet into a weapon. Every human settlement was a fortress. Every human civilian was a soldier. Every piece of their technology had been converted into something deadly. His voice became bitter. We learned that human children as young as 10 were serving as scouts and messengers for the resistance. They would approach our soldiers looking lost or scared, then lead patrols into ambushes. Human elderly were manufacturing explosives in their basements. Human teachers were training civilians in combat tactics. Zexathara's breathing became rapid again. The worst part was that they all looked so normal. A human family having dinner would wave at our patrols as we passed their house. Then, an hour later, that same family would attack us with homemade weapons and improvised explosives. He stared at his hands. We could not tell the difference between combatants and civilians, because there was no difference. Every human on the planet was part of their military, even the ones who appeared helpless or friendly. Dr. Mylith made rapid notes, trying to process the implications. I remember one incident that summarized the entire invasion. My new unit was patrolling a human city when we encountered a group of their younglings, maybe 8 or 10 years old. They were playing in a park, laughing and running around like children do on every world. His voice became very quiet. One of our soldiers, a veteran named Klex, felt sorry for them. He had younglings of his own back home. He approached the human children and offered them food from his emergency rations. Zexathara's hands began shaking violently. The children smiled and thanked him. They ate the food gratefully. Then they asked if he wanted to see their pet. They led him to a small building where they said they kept a domestic animal. He was breathing very fast now. The building was full of explosives, enough to destroy an entire city block. Those human children, babies by our standards, had been trained to lure enemy soldiers to their death. They knew they would die in the explosion, but they did it anyway. Dr. Mylith felt sick. Klex realized what was happening just before the building detonated. He tried to run, but the children had locked the doors from the inside. He died with them when the bombs went off. Zexathara looked directly at her. That was when I understood the truth about humans. They do not just fight wars, they do not just become weapons. They turn their entire civilization into a single organism designed to destroy enemies. Every human, from the youngest to the oldest, becomes part of that organism. His voice dropped to a whisper. And they do it while still being human. Still caring for each other. Still showing kindness to their friends and family. They can be monsters to their enemies and loving parents to their children at the same time. The room was silent for several minutes. 4 days, Zexathara repeated. That is how long it took for the humans to convince our entire invasion force to abandon Earth. Not through superior weapons or tactics, through sheer, absolute commitment to victory at any cost. He slumped in his chair. We left Earth knowing that we could conquer the planet if we were willing to kill every human on it. Dr. Mylith sat in silence for several minutes after Zexathara finished describing the Earth invasion. The alien veteran was staring at the table, his 4 hands completely still for the first time since the interview began. She could see exhaustion in every line of his armored body. That must have been incredibly traumatic, she said softly. How did you cope with returning to the fleet after experiences like that? Zexathara looked up at her with those dark, haunted eyes. We did not cope, Doctor. Most of the soldiers who survived the Earth invasion are either dead by suicide or confined to medical facilities like this one. The few of us who can still function are broken inside. He shifted in his chair and winced, as if the movement caused pain. The fleet commanders tried to pretend that the withdrawal from Earth was a strategic decision. They told the media that we had achieved our objectives and were moving to other targets, but every soldier who was there knew the truth. His voice became bitter. We had been defeated by a species that should have been easy to conquer. Defeated, so completely that our entire military doctrine had to be abandoned. Everything we thought we knew about warfare was proven wrong by 3 days of fighting humans. Dr. Mylith made notes while listening. What happened to you personally after the withdrawal? I spent 6 months in a military hospital. The doctors said I was suffering from combat stress disorder. They gave me medications and therapy sessions. They told me that my experiences were not real, that my memories were distorted by trauma. Zexathara's hands began moving restlessly again. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what humans were capable of. And I knew that the war was already lost, even though it continued for another year. He paused and looked at her directly. You want to understand why the collective ultimately surrendered to humanity, Doctor? It was not because of their technology or their numbers. It was because we realized that defeating them would require us to become like them. Dr. Mylith looked confused. What do you mean? To beat humans at their own game, we would have to think like them, fight like them, be willing to sacrifice everything for victory. We would have to turn our entire civilization into a weapon like they had done. His voice became very quiet. But we could not do that. The collective values order, stability, rational, decision-making. We fight wars to achieve specific goals with acceptable losses. We have rules and traditions that limit how far we will go. Zexathara stared at the wall behind her. Humans have no such limits when their survival is threatened. They will sacrifice their children, destroy their own worlds, and commit acts that other species consider insane if it gives them even a small advantage against their enemies. Dr. Mylith made rapid notes, trying to capture his words exactly. I remember the final battle report that convinced our high command to seek peace. It came from a collective force that had attacked a human agricultural world called Green Valley. The planet had no military value, just farms and small towns. Our commanders thought it would be an easy victory. His hands stopped moving. The humans on Green Valley had 6 months to prepare for our attack. When our forces landed, they found that the entire population had disappeared underground. Every farm, every town, every building was empty. Zexathara's breathing became shallow. But the humans had not fled. They had spent those 6 months turning their agricultural equipment into weapons. Farming machines became mobile artillery. Irrigation systems became delivery methods for chemical weapons. Even the crops themselves were weaponized. He shuddered. The human defenders, led by a farmer named Colonel Ben Rogers and a schoolteacher named Helen Price, had created the most sophisticated defense network any of our generals had ever seen. They used their knowledge of the land, their agricultural technology, and their absolute commitment to victory to create a killing ground that stretched across an entire continent. Dr. Mylith stopped writing and stared at her patient. Our forces spent 3 weeks trying to control Green Valley. We lost 40,000 soldiers fighting farmers and teachers and children. In the end, we controlled empty fields and ruined buildings while the humans escaped to fight us somewhere else. His voice cracked. That was when our leaders finally understood what we were really fighting. Not just an enemy army or even an enemy species. We were fighting an entire civilization that had decided to go to war. Every human everywhere had become part of a single military organism that could adapt and learn and strike back, no matter how badly we hurt them. Zexathara put his head in his hands. The peace negotiations began a month after Green Valley. Our diplomats met with human representatives on a neutral world. I was not there, but I read the transcripts later. He raised his head and looked at her. The human negotiator was a female named General Kate Murphy. She had been in charge of Earth's defense during our invasion. Our diplomats expected her to be angry or hostile after everything that had happened. His voice became puzzled. Instead, she was polite and professional. She offered our delegation food and comfortable accommodations. She asked about their families and expressed sympathy for our military losses. She acted like a gracious host, welcoming guests to her home. Dr. Mylith felt confused. That sounds very civilized. That was exactly what terrified our negotiators, Zexathara replied. General Murphy could sit across a table and discuss peace terms while knowing that she had personally ordered the deaths of hundreds of thousands of collective soldiers. She could be kind and caring and absolutely ruthless at the same time. His hands began shaking again. During the negotiations, Murphy explained why humans fight the way they do. She said that for most of their history, Humans lived on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Diseases, natural disasters, predatory animals, and other humans. They learned to survive by turning everything around them into tools. For survival, Zexthera's voice became thoughtful. She said that when humans are threatened with extinction, they do not just fight back, they evolve. Their entire society adapts to become whatever is necessary for survival. If they need to become weapons, they become weapons. If they need to become monsters, they become monsters. He stared at his hands. But Murphy also said something else that I have never forgotten. She told our diplomats that humans do not enjoy war. They do not want to be weapons or monsters. They would prefer to be farmers and teachers and parents. But when someone threatens their families and their homes, they will become whatever they need to become. Dr. Myleth made notes while processing this information. The peace treaty was signed 3 months later. The collective agreed to withdraw from all human territory and pay compensation for war damages. In return, humans agreed not to expand beyond their current borders for 50 years. Zexthara looked directly at her. Most people think the humans won the war because they were better fighters, but that is not the real reason. They won because they understood something that we did not. What was that? Dr. Myleth asked. War is not about weapons or tactics or technology. War is about will. The side that wants victory more will usually get it regardless of other factors. And humans wanted victory more than we wanted conquest. His voice became very quiet. We were fighting for territory and resources and political advantage. Things that could be gained or lost without destroying our civilization. Humans were fighting for their existence, for their children's future, for the right to continue being human. Zexthara slumped in his chair. You cannot defeat an enemy like that unless you are willing to pay any price for victory. The collective was not willing to pay that price. We valued our own lives and our own civilization too much to destroy ourselves just to conquer humans. He was quiet for several minutes. That is why I agreed to this interview, Doctor. Not to help future military planning or to provide intelligence about human weaknesses. I wanted to make sure that other species understand what they would be facing if they ever threaten humanity. Dr. Myleth looked up from her notes. Humans are not invincible. They can be defeated. But defeating them requires becoming something that most civilized species are not willing to become. You have to be prepared to sacrifice everything you are, just for the chance to destroy them. His voice dropped to a whisper. And even if you win, you will discover that the cost of victory has turned you into the very thing you fought against. You will have become human yourself in the worst possible way. Zexthara stood up slowly, his movements stiff and painful. I hope that other species will learn from our mistake, Doctor. I hope they will choose to live in peace with humanity, rather than test their resolve in war. He walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her. Because if they make the same choice we did, they will discover that humans have spent their entire history learning how to survive impossible odds, and they have become very, very good at it. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Dr. Myleth alone with her notes and the disturbing realization that she had just heard the most important testimony of her career. She sat in the quiet room for a long time, thinking about everything Zexthara had told her. Finally, she picked up her tablet and began writing her report, knowing that it would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. The war was over, but its lessons would echo through the stars for generations to come.